Generating traffic and sales can be a challenge for online merchants. But selling on the Walmart Marketplace puts your products in front of millions of customers who shop on Walmart.com. And right now, sellers who join Walmart Marketplace can save up to 50% on referral and fulfillment fees for the first 90 days. So get started today. Head over to marketplace.walmart.com/savings. That's marketplace.walmart.com/savings. Welcome to E-Commerce Conversations, a weekly podcast from Practical E-Commerce, hosted by entrepreneur Eric Bandholz.
What is going on, Internet? Eric Bandholz back again with another E-Commerce Conversations. I hope all is going well on the other side of the Internet. On the other side of the table from me, Joel. What's up?
Joel. I just like the first name, one name intro.
Yeah.
That's great.
Who cares about your last name?
No,
man?
I mean,
we're on a first name basis.
I aspire to be the only Joel on the internet. That works.
Good to have you back on the show. We were just talking before we hit record that we think this is your second time on the show.
Yeah, it's the second time.
All right. Give like your little 15-second, 30-second pitch so everyone knows who the hell you are.
Yeah, my name is Joel. I run a company called Impossible. You don't get my last name. We'll talk about that later. Impossible. Impossible is a performance apparel and nutrition company. So we do performance formulations of supplements for athletes and adventurers. So we have an energy product. We have a sleep and recovery product as well.
The reason I got Joel on here isn't really to talk about Impossible or what they're doing. It's because yesterday Beardbrand got served, and I'm not talking like pickleball. I'm not talking tennis. I'm talking with a ADA compliance lawsuit. And Joel has a knack for finding lawsuits too, don't you?
I feel like I'm the lawsuit reference guy in Austin. Like if someone gets sued, I get a phone call. So yeah, I mean, I think lawsuits find me. I don't know if I find lawsuits.
Yeah. Well, I guess it's the same case for me too.
Yeah.
And I could have brought, and maybe I will bring a lawyer on too. I think there's like the legal perspective of what to do, but I think it's important to talk about it like from the entrepreneur's perspective.
Yep.
And how we look at the strategy, how to handle this. One of my friends, Patrick, was supply. He got sued as well. And his goal was, I don't want to think about it. Just hand it over to this lawyer and settle, do whatever, and move on with his business, which I think is the logical strategy. As an entrepreneur and like a principled guy, that really irks me the wrong way. Like, you're kind of the same way too. Like, you're willing to go to fight.
Yeah, I mean, we've had to throw down because we can talk about the different levels of it, but most of the things that have come our way have been people trying to literally stop us from operating our business. A lot of times with the ADA stuff or, there's other lawsuits out there, they're just looking to shake you down for, whatever amount of money. But, I think the reason a lot of people get into entrepreneurship is you see something in the world where you're like, this isn't right, or there should be something new here, and I should be the one to do that. And so when sometimes these lawsuits come up, it's easy to be like, well, this is clearly not operating in the correct format, so someone should do something about this. And, a lot of people don't, and that's kind of why some of these lawsuits self-perpetuate, because they know they're just going to harass people until, they get whatever amount of money they want to get out of you. So, but
yeah,
that doesn't settle really well with a lot of entrepreneurs because they want to, they want to do the right thing on the principle.
So from what I hear from entrepreneurs, I'm not going to name any names, but it sounds like, plan on spending $8,000 in lawyer fees and then, $6,000 to $10,000 in settling for an ADA thing. So what is that? Like $18K to $15K, something like that is going to be your out of pocket.
Yep.
And then if you're lucky, your insurance will kind of pay for it. And then you just move on with your life. From talking with the lawyers already that I've been talking to, they say like kind of like the same range as what they told me. And then if you fight it, it's going to be like 25 to 50K.
Yeah.
Is what it's going to cost me.
Yeah.
And my year's been trash. And it's like I've lost so much money this year. Like what's another $35,000 to lose?
It's like a cornered animal. You don't want to see Eric when he's angry.
Yeah, I mean, I'm already losing all my money. I might as well bring somebody else down with me, or make their life miserable. The funny thing is, my webmaster is legally blind.
Interesting.
Yeah. I mean, granted, she wears glasses that allows her to see, but she's got like a negative 10 or 11.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So it's like, I was on YouTube looking, I'm like, what is it like for a negative 10 person? It's just like blobs.
Yeah.
You cannot see anything.
Oh, it shows you like, hey, negative.
Like they get like a little lens and they put it over the phone so you can see like -1 all the way through.
Interesting.
And so I was like, oh my God, this is what you see? And she's like, yeah, pretty much. I'm like, like, I don't know how you can move in the world.
Like you have to give her a raise now.
So, there's a lot of things that frustrate me about this because, we do like, I'm dyslexic, so I don't know if it's WGAC or WCAG scans all the time. And I think something always gets dinged, in my opinion. Like there's no way to have a perfect website, especially if you're making iterations or changes or A/B testing. Like something's always going to fall through the cracks. But generally speaking, like we alt tag everything. We've got the ARIA labels on there. Like, we have high contrast design that we've done purposely. Over the years. We have in our footer, recommendation to email us or call us for, any kind of special needs. We'll take an order over the phone. Like we want to help people with disabilities buy from us if they want to buy from us. And we also sell on Amazon too. So if they want our products, they can buy on different platforms. So it's really frustrating to kind of get this. I did a scan of the lawyer's website who's suing us, and their website got lower rating than our website.
That's not good.
I mean, well, it's just like the irony of the situation.
Yeah.
So,
do they specialize in these lawsuits?
Yeah.
Okay.
So the person who's suing us, she was trying to buy our sea salt spray, allegedly, and she's suing like 50 other people right now.
Okay.
And it's just like a toddler company, a brewery, It's just like, this does not seem like it fits the psychographic. So my question is like, if you take it to court, like, are you able to bring all that in, and like bring like doubt to her feasibility, or do they just like, they're like, this is the law. Doesn't matter if she's suing a bunch of other things. Doesn't matter if it shows that she's being frivolous.
Yeah. I think it kind of depends on like what the end game is. Like if you want to stop like her, like, so there's different ways you can like scale this out, right? So initially you have your lawsuit that you're concerned about and you'd like that to be over. Then you have this person that's going out and suing 50 people. And then, she's probably not the only person doing that. So there's, that whole industry, right? So it kind of depends on what the goal of fighting it would be. Is if you want to just resolve, the acute issue of your lawsuit, that's probably, figure out what that payment is and, just have it handled. If you're bringing up into who this person is and what they're doing from they're just batch suing people, that's one thing. And you might be able to bring in the fact that like, this is what they're doing, but because it's like an ADA thing, it could just be like, yeah, we have issues with lots of retailers, and that they could make the argument that, they're just trying to, be helpful. If you want to go, higher up the chain and try to like change like what case law, like the problem with all of those things is your personal lawsuit is going to be, relatively short. If you want to start fighting it, lawsuits can take years. I mean, I've been getting sued for 2 years, I think, and then we won it, and then they appealed it. So it's like another year on the appeal. So the time length on this is another thing to consider, because if you just got to spend, whatever you got to spend right now, if you could spread that over, a couple of years, that actually probably gives you a better playing field because you're generating revenue.
Yeah.
Everything's not going to be as bad as...
Yeah, $50K over 2 years.
Yeah. So it kind of depends on what the goal is. And so the idea of like putting down this one case is interesting. Handling, this one, making this person and probably coming out with like an example of them, that could be interesting. But really, there's going to be this whole cottage industry of people doing this regardless, while those laws kind of lag behind technology.
Yeah.
I think a lot of that legislation probably has really good intent, and then it's probably great for someone like Target, to keep them accountable. But like if, dealing with small businesses or even, decent sized small businesses, it makes it really tough where it's like, you're not trying to do anything bad. And if she would have called you and been like, hey, can you update this? You might have taken the call and you probably would have updated it if it was a real thing.
Yeah.
And so you could, it really depends. I'm not super familiar with all the ADA stuff. I know we probably have a lot of mutual friends who have gone through similar things. And I think most people just do the first option because they want it over. They want to go back to their business, and they didn't get into their business to do lawsuits and spend time in court. And so, but then there's people like Cloudflare. I think Cloudflare was dealing with some copyright trolls or some similar type concept where they're like,
trolls.
yeah, maybe it was a patent troll. And they were so upset that they're like, this is not how it should be done. These guys are being abusive, and not only are they being abusive, but this law is poorly written, so we want to get this changed. And I think they took those people, they're like, okay, game on, let's fight this. I think they ended up eventually winning that case. I don't know if they got the law changed, but they basically said, okay, we're going to take this 0 to 100. And that's interesting because they got a lot of clout and press because they were willing to fight for something they believed in, and that actually layered into their brand. So, but that was also super clear of like, these guys are patent trolls. This is what they do. This is their industry. That's kind of harder. Like, there's similar things that happen, for all these niche
ambulance chasers.
Yeah. But it's harder to do if it's like, if it's for like a disability type thing. And then she comes back and she's like, actually, I have real issues and da. Like, it's emotionally, that's a tougher opponent to fight against, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, it is, from the entrepreneur's perspective, it's clear that this is a shakedown. Like, someone with good intent, the first thing they would do is not throw a lawsuit to somebody.
Yep.
And they wouldn't throw it to 50 people.
Yep.
I think it would be fair if, like, yeah, she reached out to us. I'm trying to order from you. Can you make these adjustments to your website? Try again in 2 weeks. If it doesn't work, let us know. And then, like, that's good intent. But anyways, I kind of want to like get back to something else we talked about before we hit record, and it's finding a lawyer. Because I feel like finding a lawyer is just as important as the strategy you have, or even like your strategy kind of plays into part which lawyer you're going to go.
Yep. So the first thing that I tell people when they're dealing with lawyers is just get a second opinion, at least one. So someone talks to one guy and they tell you this is exactly what you can do. One of the first things you realize about working with lawyers is that lawyers are like every other industry. If you're in an industry you know really well, you're like, okay, everybody says they're a graphic designer. In reality, there's 1 out of 10 is an amazing graphic designer, and then like 6 out of 10 are okay, and then there's a couple bad ones in there. Same thing with lawyers. It sounds different, like doctors, lawyers, they have all these degrees. You think everybody should be a 10 out of 10, and it's just not the case. And so different lawyers are going to have different specialties, so make sure you're kind of niching down on whatever issue you're dealing with. But then talk to a bunch of people. Most lawyers will give you a free 30-minute introductory call, or just be like, hey, what are you dealing with? And they'll give you feedback. If you talk to 10 people, you'll get kind of a consensus of what the middle range thinks. So like, okay, this is kind of probably what the outcomes are going to be. And you're going to start getting averages that you can start figuring out what are probable outcomes. You also might find some ones that are like, oh, I've dealt with an exact case like this specifically, and we did this, this, and this. And if they can speak to specifics, especially with other stuff that they've done, that is usually a green flag. And then you just kind of have to suss it out. And if you talk to 15 lawyers, you're going to have a pretty good idea of at least who can, persuade you. Yeah. And if they can persuade you, they can probably, persuade the court a little bit better. So I would just talk to a lot of people, and they're going to give you their time for free for that first 15 minutes because they want to have you put on retainer. And so if you just talk to a bunch of people, you get a really good idea of the range of outcomes. And most people don't do that. They just talk to one person and they get a limited range of outcomes, and they're like, well, I'm screwed. And that's not the case. And you can have more options, but you have to know. You've probably never dealt with lawyers. You've probably never dealt with the ADA. You don't know anything about it. So you just have to educate yourself. So you take the 5 hours of phone calls as education on this new area of space.
So far, I've talked to 2 lawyers. My standard lawyer who I work with for everything for more or less like trademark stuff. And they're a large firm, so they bring in experts in this regard. The downside is they're not in New York. So it's kind of not their expertise. And then I talked to another one who's...
the lawsuit's in New York.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's in New York. The other one has actually dealt with the person who's suing us like 100 times before. So that's also kind of frustrating because it's like clearly a racket. Like the suing party knows what's in it, but also the people who defend them don't want it to end, right? Because they're getting paid just as well. So it's like, a little bit of me is like, man, I feel like I'm participating in like
That's interesting if this one guy is consistently defending all the cases from this plaintiff. That seems... They've like built their own little,
so it's like
flywheel.
How do we, like, if they work so closely together and so frequently, on one hand, it's kind of good, but like they got to be like, I wouldn't say they're buddies at this point, but they got to know each other like really well and what they're going to do and what they're not going to do, and subsequently the plaintiff has got to know what the defending lawyer, his strategy is and how they typically handle it, right?
So can you should be able to look up other lawsuits that this plaintiff has filed.
Yeah.
Historical. And you might be able to see outcomes. So you could see, especially if they're doing this en masse. If someone's only filed like one other lawsuit, it's kind of hard to know who they are, what their motivations are. Sometimes you see these settlements that have come through, and that'll give you like a bandwidth on, okay, so they went through, they fought this lawsuit, and they ended up with maybe they won, quote unquote, won the lawsuit, and they got a $10,000 settlement after the fighting it all the way through. And so, okay.
So I pulled it up. This is, I guess this is public information. So maybe we post the PDF on e-commerce conversations on Practical E-commerce's website, so you guys can look through and see what it is. Here's us. But how would you like see how far it's going?
So I think the stuff that I've seen in the past is I've just been, this is sometimes what a lawyer can bring to the table a little bit better, where they can search the court dockets and they can pull up, what these other people have done. And they're like, okay, they've settled this case for $10K, this case for...
Like settlement wouldn't be public though, right?
If it goes all the way through, but a settlement probably won't. But if they get a judgment from the court, so a lot of times they'll come to you and they'll be like, hey, we got one judgment for $400,000 or whatever the number is. And it's some big number. It sounds scary. And you're like, wow, I'm going to have to pay all my legal fees. And then I'm going to get the court judgment and it's going to be $400,000. But if you look at it, it's usually one outlier. And the actual, 85% of these are going to get settled. And then the majority of the ones that get judgments on it are probably in a much lower tier range. It's talking 4 to 5 figures. I don't know ADA exactly, but other schemes like this are kind of like that. And so if you have an idea, we had a similar thing with a copyright issue at one point. It was like on an unhosted site and it got indexed in Google, and it was this whole thing. But they wanted like 120. Most of the...
Was it a registered copyright of the photograph?
No, it was just a photograph that like somehow ended up on it wasn't even a live site at the time.
Yeah. But I mean, did they have that copyright registered?
I don't even know if it was... I don't know the specifics of it, but it was basically what they were saying is like, hey, we have these judgments, and these judgments are hundreds of thousands of dollars. And you're like, okay. And then you look at the majority of the actual settlements they have, they're in like the 2 to 6K range or something like that. And so, eventually like all of that comes out. It's like your best case scenario for a lot of these guys is, they're doing 50 of them. And so you just got to think about like an entrepreneur. So you're doing like 50 cases, you get 5K a piece or whatever, 250K he's going to pay. He's working on contingency, so he's going to pay XYZ, to the plaintiff. The numbers for ADA might be a little bit higher, but that's kind of how I would think about it. So just from the numbers perspective, that's one thing. Now, if there's anything you could do about like, laws do change, laws do update. And if you talk to a lawyer that's like, yeah, there's actually like, people are misinterpreting how this is done. There's actually a way you can invert this. That's where you could look at these bigger things and be like, actually, we do want to fight this. We do want to, push this out. We do think we can make a change here and actually help out other entrepreneurs.
Well, from what I hear is like, if push comes to shove, like these lawyers will just drop it at a certain point.
Yeah.
You're going to dismiss it because they don't want it to go to court.
Yeah. Sometimes you can countersue.
Can you really?
Sometimes, I don't know about ADA specifically, but like on some stuff, I've seen stuff with like domain names where like someone will use some sort of court action to try to take a domain name, and then because they didn't have a chance, like it was an abuse of the law, you're able to countersue them for damages and infringements. That's the stuff you only find out at like the top 10% of lawyers. Like most lawyers are just gonna be like, here's your range of options, this is what we do.
Yeah.
And they're just doing the normal stuff. Then there's the 10% of lawyers that are like setting new case laws, creating new precedents, like doing stuff like that. But those guys are harder to find and they're really expensive. And sometimes even with those guys, you need to be the creative entrepreneur, because lawyers, this is actually really useful for entrepreneurs to understand. lawyers are really good at being lawyers. And lawyers are like, it's basically like a flow chart of legalese. And they're like, well, if you do this, then you can do this, then you can do this. Sometimes they're not great at generating the top level strategy or the possibilities that you could go out from. And so they're coming at it from like, hey, you want to just solve your specific lawsuit. So here's your range of options. You're like, no, I actually want to change how this law is interpreted. Now, like that's a big jump, but when you bring the creativity to the table, you let the lawyers kind of work from a wider range of options. And so one of the things that I've had to do sometimes is like help the lawyers be more creative and be like, well, what if we did this and we, you said something about this, and we combined them and we did like a combination of sorts. And they're like, oh, well, in that case, we could do this, this, and this, and this. So you have to jumpstart the creativity for them a lot of times because they're very analytical and they're very good at that. But a lot of times they're working off of this is how things are done and this is how they've always been done. And if you're like, well, I'm looking at this with fresh eyes, like, is there a way that we could
again, like I think there might be incentive for them to not change it. Like for those who are in on the racket.
Well, if you're working with some guy who just defends this thing and then he settles them all for like that's part of his racket too. Like, I mean, I don't want to say it's a racket. But
I mean, he's on the good side of it.
But he's saying like, okay, I'm on the good side of it, but I'm going to take $4,000 in fees from you, and you're still going to pay $10,000, and this thing is never actually fixed.
Yeah.
Like the good side of that is
let's find a way to
we fight them and they're done, or they see my name on, because this is the other thing. Lawyers look each other up, so they know who they're dealing with. And if this guy's dealing with his buddy, he's like, okay, this is probably what I'm going to get out of dealing with this guy. If this guy comes out and he's like, the last 4 cases this guy's had, he's stretched out, or he's made my life really difficult, or he's filed a bunch of motions that I have to file, and so all of a sudden my contingency doesn't make any sense anymore. Like, you probably want somebody that this other guy's trying to avoid. Like he's like scared of him.
I guess the key would be to find all the ones that were dismissed. And is there a way to find like who represents them, or is that information public?
You should be able to find all the lawsuits that this person has filed, and then they're probably likely represented by the same person, but then you should be able to see the status of it. And if there's a judgment on it, that's one thing. And then you can go through if it's settled or if it's withdrawn, and then you could figure out who's representing on the defense side. And I would it's hard to say because you're not going to see numbers on settlements, at least that are publicly.
Is there a way to tell if it was settled or withdrawn? Like if the plaintiff pulled it versus...
Usually,
or do they pull it because it gets settled? I mean,
that's actually a good question. So we've done like one of those, and I don't know what was publicly shown versus what, like, I just know we're like not supposed to talk about it or whatever.
Yeah.
Usually it's withdrawn, and I think usually they say it's like withdrawn with prejudice when it's settled, and so it means they're not going to bring it again. That's a good question. I would actually, if I was looking at it and I was just trying to figure it out, I would go off of like time the case was open.
Yeah.
So if the case was open for, a month, there's probably some settlement deal in there. If it was dragged out forever, maybe the guy just withdrew it. But usually there's no incentive for them to withdraw it because they're running on contingencies. Yeah. He's running the same form letter. It's not like it's taken him a long time. He's got an SOP for doing this. Yeah. We actually have, I think we got one of these one time, and they had some other company's name in like the header. And you're like, it's not us, dude. That's not even referring to us. That's the wrong case. So, his billable time versus like if he's just going to keep it open until he has a lull on the schedule, and then he's like, oh, I guess I have Thursday free, send more letters, and then just, deals with that.
Yeah.
So I don't know any situations where they proactively withdraw stuff, but I could be wrong on that. Usually it's not going to cost him any more time to just keep it open.
Yeah.
And it's going to be like...
But I mean, like, taking it to court, right? Like, how do you take it to court? How do you just be like, let's go to court. I'm ready to fight it.
Yeah, so you usually get on a scheduling docket. I don't know what the scheduling is for, like, ADA stuff. For us, we got sued in, like, April. I think the first, like, the hearings and everything the arguments were sometime in, like, September, and we got a ruling in November. And then there was an appeal, and the appeal happened, I want to say like in January, and then the actual arguments was like next November, and then we're still waiting on that. Like so I mean, you're talking 2.5 years.
But it seems like a lot of work if your thing is just to shake people down for a settlement.
Yeah.
Like, why would you go through all this work to get.
Well, he's also his model is a little bit different than like if you're doing 50 lawsuits at one time, it's not that actually much. It's the same letter with like Excel merge, different names.
No, I understand. Like you would stick to that format where you could do all that stuff that's automated.
Yeah.
But the minute like you have to start preparing for court, you have to like testify, you have to bring people in, you have to schedule all that. That seems like a lot of work compared to just sending out, these form letters and aiming for a quick settlement.
Yeah. So probably he's got like 10% of people that are going to even do anything besides just pay him immediately whatever he wants. Probably less than that. Yeah. So he doesn't have to do that many. And if they stretch out over time, then it's like he's doing 2 a year. And I mean, he's clearly made the calculation that it's a model he's I don't know if it's he or she.
The lawyer's a man.
It's a model they're happy with. So I think that's what they do on the contingencies. They're going to make so much money just sending out scary letters. I think that's the model. They're going to make so much money sending out scary letters that when they get in front of the court for, one day a year, it's fine.
Yeah.
Like, he's like, okay, you chalk it up to the game.
But like if everyone fights him.
Yeah. But if other people are having a bad year and they're just like, I just don't want to deal with. I think emotionally, this is the toughest thing for entrepreneurs is emotionally dealing with this, because structurally the issue is not. Lawsuits are they can be straightforward. There's intense parts where if you have to do a deposition, if you're actually going through the appeals process, you're actually going to court, those things can be super stressful. But I found we talked about this a little bit, it's the emotionality of just, this is so, entrepreneurs get into the game because you want to change things for the better. And when stuff like this happens, it's just like, this is clearly not working in an optimal way.
Right.
And one of the things, this is not really lawsuit related, but one of the things I actually had to stop worrying about lately was getting upset about other people's problems that are not optimized. Like, what are all the problems in the world you can solve? And I get distracted. I'm like, this should not work like this should not work like that. And it was just like a creative way of like procrastinating for me of, okay, but what about these problems that are in front of you that you're supposed to work on? I'm like, well, I can't do that because I have to deal with this system, and this system is not fair and just and all this other stuff. It's like, okay, well, what about your stuff? And you're like, well, about this thing over here. And it's just like, what's the core problems you want to solve? And if, fighting the lawsuit can fit into that, and there's ways like Cloudflare has made that work. Yeah. I think that totally makes sense. But, like the legal system in the US is kind of tough, especially for entrepreneurs, where you don't have tons of VCs backing you. You can't just, some people's business plan is literally, we're going to litigate our competitors out of business. And it works because even if you win, you have to front the costs. And if you're a multi-billion-dollar company and you have billions of dollars to go ahead and do that, you can do that. And even if you win as a small business, then like you might get the cost reimbursed, maybe, but it's not guaranteed. So I don't know. That was a long soliloquy of thoughts on getting sued.
Yeah. I mean, it's frustrating. I think it's also, if you're in the game long enough, it's going to happen.
Is this your first lawsuit?
Yeah. Yeah. No, 11 years.
Welcome to the club.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My business partner, he was named on it. So
okay, it
was his first as well.
Okay. So Noah Kagan.
Yeah.
When I got first sued in like 2014 or whatever, he's like, well, congratulations. If you haven't been sued, you haven't been doing anything notable. So it was, a nice welcome gift. We should make commemorative something.
Like you've made it.
Yeah. You've congratulations on the lawsuit.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's frustrating and it's annoying because it shouldn't happen. And it's not like you were trying to mess with these people, right? So,
what would you do? Would you like something like this? Gray law. There's always something wrong with your website you could find, and they could argue that you weren't compliant enough.
What are the numbers on it? I mean, I don't know if you want to talk about that live.
What the numbers on?
Like, what are they asking for?
Well, it's public, so it's
okay.
They put $75,000
okay
in the lawsuit of damages.
Yeah.
I should look at all of them and see if they just have $75,000 for every single letter.
I'm curious what most settlements on the ADA. I would say tangential, like just talking to other friends who've dealt with it. I think they've usually settled something like that in like the 15 range, like the low 5 figures. I mean, it really depends. I don't want to say I like the fight, but if there's a reason to be, I'm not scared of fights is a better way to put it. And if someone comes after me for something that is just clearly, if it's about character, then I'm much more upset. And so the ADA thing is kind of a gray zone. If it was something that you could turn into, like, hey, this is, we actually really care about our our disabled customers, and we actually spend a lot of time with them. We've highlighted them in different videos, and we've done all these different things. Like, if there's a way that you could actually talk about it, then basically you could look at it as like a $75,000 marketing expense and turn it into something where you're like, actually, we care about this, and we care about these regulations. We try really hard all the time to actually, to meet these standards and exceed them where we can. We're a small business, so we don't have a multi-billion-dollar resources, but we try really hard. And this person alone has filed 50 lawsuits. Clearly that's not a good faith measure. And we want to make it a bigger deal than we're not just fighting for us, we're fighting for other people.
Yeah, fighting for the e-commerce industry.
Yeah. I think it's really tough to do that. Just to say hey, if we all fought it, you're basically asking other people to, bring on those costs for themselves as well. But if you're like, hey, this is something that we can afford to go into, I think there's an interesting way to do that. And I don't know, how I'm not as familiar with ADA as I'm with other parts of, legal discourse stuff, but I don't know if there's a chance that you could have some of these ADA laws rewritten to be more helpful, or I don't know. It feels weird to me that Shopify doesn't have a pre-scan on this since you're using the platform. It's those types of things where you're kind of moving up the chain in e-commerce. I mean, you already do this a little bit as a leader in the e-commerce space. Well, doing something along those lines to make sure that, okay, if you're taking a bullet, you're at least going to make sure that other e-commerce people in the space are not going to be having to deal with the same thing too. So, maybe you can change that law, or if that law is going to stay in place, maybe there's a solution that is there a way that you could have a service that you build out for under $75K that helps other entrepreneurs deal with that? And is that on the mark as far as Beardbrand core activities? Maybe not, but it helps build the profile in this space, and yours specifically as a leader in e-commerce.
Yeah.
That's an interesting.
Yeah. I mean, it would be nice to build a blueprint for how to fight these and not settle, because that's what I want to set the benchmark for. And it does require making sure you invest in your website. And
that would be an interesting template. This guy's got an SOP for sending out lawsuits. Have a template for quickly fighting these lawsuits, even if you're self-representing or having a lawyer. That would actually be really interesting, because then you're neutralizing, their main thing, which is lawyer fees that you're going to have to pay. And they're as long as you want to drag this out, you're just going to have to be paying more and more and more. And our settlement number is probably going to be the same number regardless.
Yeah. Sweet, man. Where can people follow you? Where can they buy some sleep enhancements?
Yeah. Check me out at Joel Runyon on Twitter, X, whatever they're calling that. Impossible is at impossible.co. We have a sleep recovery product for maybe stressed out entrepreneurs who are getting sued, and helps improve sleep and recovery. We also have an energy product. If you're really stressed out, you need to hit go. It's a clean energy drink mix. All that is at impossible.co, and impossiblehq.com is where a lot of our content stuff lives. So come check it out.
Sweet, Joel. I appreciate your advice and guidance as I work through these challenging times.
You got to keep me posted.
As always, this has been another e-commerce Conversations. Hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Cheers. Keep on growing.